This is a true story about deception from my father, a con artist, and his greedy fifth wife, two attorneys, and a judge who wouldn't listen to my case. This story began when my dad's fifth wife left him for an inmate at her job. My grandmother heard this and decided that she no longer wanted my dad or Joy to retain possession of her home when she passed away. She was in fear that it would go to the fifth wife and whoever her new husband would be. So a verbal agreement ensued. It was made between all of us, my father, my grandmother, and myself, that the cabin house was to be left in the family. In 2009, I was visiting Oregon from New Mexico with my grandmother, my dad, and myself. We took a boating accident. My grandmother fell and needed immediate wound care and health care needs. My father, my granny, myself, and our pastor discussed this at our kitchen table the next day. We agreed that Granny would go to Doug and Linda's immediately, who was a pastor and a registered nurse. I would return to New Mexico, and my father would go back to Virginia. The agreement was this: Dad and Joy would be released of any physical care for grandmother, and I would also receive all of her jewelry, a piano that was already in their possession, and some family money that was in a savings account. I would return to Santa Fe, pack up my farm, return to Oregon, and begin care for Granny. I had been trained to be a caretaker and had been caretaking for 5 years. I would not be paid, and I would have to pay my own expenses, but would receive ownership of the cabin for doing so. We went to a place called Pacific Legal Practices to add a codicil to a will, which Granny and I thought would ensure that the future ownership of the cabin would go to me. Oddly, that morning, my father's car was at her office hours before our scheduled appointment. I can only imagine a setup of some sort was being planned. I did pay $300 by check for a will to be done and did not get it. I at least challenged her to a lie detector test to prove me wrong. My father did receive the money. Joy did keep the piano and jewelry, and I did the job. In 2012, my granny passed away. I never heard from my father or the fifth wife for many years, until 2014, when I discovered that the deed was still in their names, never having been changed as we had discussed earlier. I called him and asked him why. What was this all about? He said, "Sorry, son. Joy wouldn't sign the papers, and I can't make her, but you can buy it from us." Third mistake: I hired an attorney in Medford who writes his own case, instigating a lawsuit instead of doing what I asked him to do, thousands of dollars later. My fourth mistake: I hire a local attorney, young man, who was very verbally encouraging to me. He came from our church. He told me, "I knew your granny. I believe in you. The case speaks for itself. With all your evidence, your witnesses, etc., I certainly won't charge you the same $15,000 that the first attorney tried to." During this time, my father tried to have me evicted. He did many show of causes: eviction, pay back rent, $40,000, and elder abuse. Judge Beeman denied and dismissed these motions. Another odd fact: after each case, I got strange visitors throughout the evening. I got a newspaper guy on a video on one case. He said he was looking for a mailbox. The mailbox is 700 feet from my house. He lost his glasses unscrewing my spotlights. He had to return the next day, in which I also called the pilot. They hung up on me. The following court case, I had a supposed process server at the neighbor's looking for me. Who does that? A process server serves by surprise. I was never served anything, but it was quite upsetting, wondering what was going to happen now. After more questions, I was later told that the opposing counsel was known for harassing and trying to bully his opponent's clients. I began to wonder if 2 times is coincidental, 3 times is purposeful. Maybe I should listen to him. I would challenge this attorney to a lie detector test also. Prove me wrong. I called the pilot again, and they hung up. I later returned to put an editorial in for the public's help. It was never put in. I later found that the same guy who came in my yard actually worked somewhere else. The pilot is definitely involved somehow. They don't distribute, they don't tell the truth, and they cover for people harassing people at 3 a.m. in the night. I don't understand that. It's very, very upsetting to know that the paper will not let news out. Luckily, my jury trial date was set, April 5th and 6th. I was so excited and relieved to finally be heard after years of fighting this man and thousands of dollars out. I was so waiting for the law to prevail. Boy, was I wrong. I was sidewalked 3 times that day. I got to read only a few things. The jury was dismissed twice and the court reporter once. Attorneys were pulled to the private chambers. I was then forced to agree to nothing. On one of my sidewalks, the last, he says, my attorney, he thinks, the judge, it's a misunderstanding, and if you don't settle now, he'll charge you the $40,000 in back rent, elder abuse, and you'll be evicted. Basically, I went into shock when I heard that. He said, there is nothing I can do. I told him, you better let them know this is disgusting. This is unjust. How can he make a decision without listening to my case? He says, it just happens. When the jury and the court reporter were returned to court, Margulies announces that both parties agreed to settle. I said something like yes to something I didn't even know. I still couldn't believe I had just lost my house and was forced to settle under judge's threats of owed rent. I'm still in shock. And elder abuse? Not to mention the thoughts of moving out of the home that I worked for 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day for 3.5 years, with no pay and now no house. I left telling my attorney I was going to have a breakdown and I had to leave. My attorney quit that day. And I've been researching and wondering, how does this happen? How does a judge make these decisions without hearing my case? A judge who rules above the written law? Maybe with a reason. Why not? Why doesn't he listen? There's no testimony, no witnesses allowed. The jury was halfway gone. No attorney, no justice. I never received a stipulated judgment letter until this week. It was said to have been sent by the opposing counsel. That's kind of odd. It didn't get sent certified. He just said he mailed it and called me. Never happened. This is an outrage that the truthful story wasn't allowed to be told because of, I don't want to say whatever. I'm begging right now for a judge to let me have my day in court where the jury can decide like I requested. I'm not lying about any of this. Please help me. I'm getting ready to be evicted. I currently have nowhere to go. The dogs and the cat are in the kennel. The horses have been moved elsewhere. I'm not sure what to do next. Please, I need your help.